Thank you. Right. Yes, the reason for the swap is, as John said, I'll be following on from where Paul left off. So Paul has introduced you all to the concept of a project in APL. So how do we create and manage our source code for a project without using paren save? And how he's shown us how all the changes get written to file, and also now in the end how you can then put that onto source files. What I will be talking about is more about how to modularize your code, contribute to public libraries such as the APLTree utils, the APLTree project that Kai Jäger manages, and share code in the community. I mean, useful tools. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. Oh, actually, I'll take that back. APLers want to reinvent the wheel, and I'm hoping that we can collaborate and stop doing that to the extent that we've done so far. Right. Paul Masser, I think, briefly showed how this is stored in the file system, and I'm just going to quickly give you an overview of what a project entails. So in the file system, if you think of a project as having some sort of a configuration, it's source code, other files that you require to run your code, such as shared libraries or the like, and documentation, help files, whatever description of the API that you have. And if we agree on a standard structure for the configuration file, I mean, Acre already has its own configuration file, that configuration file could be used to describe dependencies on packages and version control of packages. So that's just an example of what that could look like. So you've got your source code for your project, and in your configuration file, you also list specific dependencies that you have on other projects, other APL projects. Right, the source code, I think, has been covered already. Acre is storing code in text files, and the idea of having a close relationship between a folder structure on the file system and the namespace structure in the workspace is maintained to just, so what you see, the structure you see in the file system is mapped to the active workspace. Right, as I said before, there might be images or other files that you require for your project, so putting them together with the project folder makes sense. Now dependencies, you can have dependencies that are direct dependencies where you require the code in runtime. You have other dependencies that might help you during the development of your project, such as builders or test frameworks that you don't want to publish with your project, but you want to have available during the development. That's another important point to make. And I've mentioned the API documentation and test files, right? Now, in the last couple of months, I've had a look at implementing some sort of a prototype for package management using the work or building on top of Acre and what they've done in the Carlyle group. Because of my recent experience with JavaScript in the RAI development, I was familiar with the package management in the JavaScript world. And looking into it, I found that it could actually be used as a vehicle to explore what packages means. But instead of managing JavaScript code and packages, we can use it to put our own APL projects. So our Acre projects can be wrapped up and put into this package management framework. To accomplish that, I've used Acre, of course. There's the Node Package Manager, which is the JavaScript package manager. We've heard enough about what Acre gives us, so I'll skip that. And the Node Package Manager, NPM, gives us a lot of features. It's been around for many years, so they've created an exhaustive API to do all sorts of things. But the main important ones are, installing package dependencies, looking for packages, and of course, if you want to contribute to the community, how to publish and update your contribution in the public registry. The registry is where all the packages are managed or stored in NPM. So when you want to contribute a package, you actually send it off to this server, and it keeps track of version number and other sub-dependencies that you have, and therefore can serve other projects when they depend on your package. So it makes sure that all the dependencies are retrieved and downloaded from that registry. It's essentially the back end of this framework. Now to some testing, right? Let's see, I gather we want to increase the font size a little bit. Does that work? I've already prepared one earlier, I see. So let's back up a little bit. If I can type, there we go. And, right, yes, we've already deleted that. Okay, so to just, before I start, I just want to say that I've written a thin wrapper on top of acre. So the user command I will use to create my project, rather than using acre directly, I will use the package manager version of that. But the syntax is identical. So if we want to create a project, we give it a folder name, we give it namespace name, and the folder already exists. This is bad preparation. Let's try again. Right. So I've created a project, and if we open that in our VS Code editor, I think I've shown VS Code before. What we're looking at here is the file explorer to see what this folder contains that I've just created from RIDE. So we have a folder here called APL source that contains a single script, a gitignore file, the acre configuration file, and an additional configuration file that is created for the package manager. Right now, all it contains is the name of the project, Belfast, and a default version number of 100. It doesn't contain much code, but that's what we will add now. Right, so a different view of this from the workspace side is that we have a namespace in the root called Belfast, and the content of that is listed there. When you have packages available, it gives you the option of reusing existing tools. So in our project, if we decide that we need to manipulate dates, and before we start implementing our own tools, we want to see if there is a date tool available, we can call or ask the package manager client for suggestions of date tools. And by calling this find package command, we quickly find out that there is a package available. It's called date and time, authored by Kai, and it's on version 1.5.2. It also has a description that has been cut off now because of the small space in the session. But essentially, you'll just take my word for it. It's a good package if you deal with dates. So we'll just add that to our project. We do that by calling the add package command, give it the name of the package, and optionally a version number that we require. So I will omit that for now. Having installed it, it throws a little bit of information out in the session to describe what it's done. And using square bracket map, we can now see that there's another item there in the root. There's a namespace called underscore packages, and in there's a date and time namespace containing the package that we just installed. If you look further down in the Belfast namespace, which is our project root, we see there's a reference to the date and time class that we've just installed. So what that means is that in your project in Belfast, we can now call and access the date and time package. So if we look at that, this is my typical example, it's there. And similarly, if we start writing our own function, within this function, we can access that package. So just to prove that point. And switching back to VS Code to look at the file system, we now see that in addition to what we had before, we now have another folder called node modules, which contains the package sources that we've installed. Another important point to make is that having installed it, it's updating the configuration file for our project, and we can see that it's listed a dependency there, date and time, and the version range that we're accepting. And that is what controls and helps us bring in the dependencies that we have in our project. Right. Now, with the NPM registry, it also has a relatively straightforward interface. So if we look at that, on APM, the APL room, you'll see that all the packages that have been published are listed with a simple search, and drilling into one of these, you can see more information about the project, what it contributes. Essentially, it lists the README file from the project's GitHub repository. And it also has links and information about published versions, so you can see what releases have been made and quickly find out any licensing information, etc., for the package. Right, I think that was the main gist of my presentation. I think I'd need to clarify that this prototype of using the JavaScript package manager is purely as a vehicle for testing the concept of packages, and exploring how we would bring in packages and access them within the active workspace. And what I've demonstrated here with its namespace structure and references being created to package dependencies is something that we would want to solve as smoothly as possible for, to fit in with how we are used to working in APL. I envisage that we will move towards our own solution for managing packages, the back end and the client side of packages. But if you are willing to contribute to that conversation and help us define the package manager framework for APL, feel free to go to our project page on GitHub, which is GitHub, the APL room /APM. There is also instructions on how to set up the APM prototype on your own machine to try it out. The registry is open for to the public, so you can create your own account there as well and try out publishing and using packages from that registry. And that's me. Thank you.